Hello, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to join me today. I hope that there's something within this video that you find that there's benefit to you or to somebody that you know. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. Please like, subscribe, and share, as with YouTube, it helps the analytics. You can, however, also find us on Rumble, Odyssey, and Locals. You can also support us, if you choose to do so, on Locals and Odyssey, The Intercept, which is NewsGuard certified. I believe it's an 85% rating. So this is not fake news. This is generally from a left leaning news source. That's why this is so shocking. So, what we have here is an article written by Ken Kilpenstein and Lee Fang. And I do apologize if I butchered their names, but I do want to give them credit for this. As again, The Intercept is generally a left leaning news source. The Department of Homeland Security is quietly broadening its efforts to curb speech it considers dangerous. An investigation by The Intercept has found years of internal DHS memos, emails, and documents obtained via leaks and an ongoing lawsuit, as well as public documents illustrating an expansive effort by the agency to influence tech platforms. The work, much of which remains unknown to the American public, came into clearer view earlier this year when DHS announced a new disinformation governance board. I went ahead and I did a whole video on this as well. And then they dissolved it. A panel designed to police misinformation, which is false information spread unintentionally, disinformation, which is false information spread intentionally, and malinformation, factual information shared typically out of context with harmful intent, such as the Pelosi story that's going on, the Hunter Biden laptop. Those are all malinformation that allegedly threatens U.S. interests. While the board was widely ridiculed, immediately scaled back, and then shut down within a few months, our initiatives are underway as DHS pivots to monitoring social media now that its original mandate, the war on terror, Afghanistan, and that whole debacle, has been wound down. They need a new enemy. Behind closed doors and through pressure on private platforms, the U.S. government has used its power to try and shape online disclosure according to meeting minutes and other records appended to a lawsuit filed by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmitz, a Republican who is also running for senator. Discussions have ranged from the scale and scope of government intervention in online discourse to the mechanical and streamlining takedown requests of false or intentionally misleading information. In a March meeting, Laura Dunlom, an FBI official, warned that the threat of subversive information on the social media could undermine support for the U.S. government. Domeyer, according to the notes of the discussion, attended this senior executives from Twitter and J.P. Morgan Chase stressed that we need a media infrastructure that is held accountable. We do coordinate with other entities when making content moderation decisions, and we independently evaluate content in line with the Twitter rules, a spokesman for Twitter said to The Intercept. There is also a formal process for government officials to directly flag content on Facebook and Instagram and request that it be throttled or suppressed through a special Facebook portal that requires a government or law enforcement email to use. At the time of the writing, the content request system at facebook.com is still live. DHS and Meta and the parent company of Facebook did not respond to requests for comment, and the FBI declined to comment. And I wonder, it's funny how YouTube isn't mentioned in this at all. According to a draft copy of DHS Quantum Homeland Security Review, DHS Capstone Report outlined the department's strategy and priorities in the coming years. The department plans to target inaccurate information on a wide range of topics, including the origins of COVID pandemic and the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccine, racial justice, and U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the nature of the U.S. support to Ukraine. So if you speak out against any of these things, you could find the federal government silencing your speech. I found this interesting when I was reading it. How disinformation is defined by the government has not been clearly articulated, and the inherent subjective nature of what constitutes disinformation provides a broad opening for DHS officials to make politically motivated determinations about what constitutes dangerous speech. The Department of Homeland Security justifies these goals, which have expanded far beyond its original purview on foreign threats to encompass information originating domestically, by claiming the terrorist threat can be exacerbated by misinformation and disinformation spread online. But the laudable goal of protecting Americans from dangers has often been used to conceal political maneuvering. In 2004, for instance, the Department of Homeland Security officials faced pressure from the George Bush administration to heighten the national threat level for terrorism in a bid to influence voters prior to the election. According to former Department of Homeland Secretary Tom Ridge, U.S. officials have routinely lied about an array of issues, from the cause of its war in Vietnam and Iraq to their more recent obfuscations according to the role of the National Institute of Health in funding the Wuhan Institute of Viral Coronavirus Research. That track record has not prevented the U.S. government from seeking to become arbiters of what constitutes false or dangerous information on the inherently political topics. Earlier this year, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law known by supporters of the Stop Woke Act, which bans private employers from workplace training, asserting an individual's moral characters is privileged or oppressed based on the race or color, sex, or national origin. The law, critics charged, amounts to a broad suppression of speech deemed offensive. The Federation, oh, by the way, now saying globalism, that's supposedly an anti-Semitic slur now. Again, controlling speech. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, has since filed a lawsuit against DeSantis, alleging unconstitutional censorship. A federal judge temporarily blocked part of the Stop Woke Act, ruling that the law had violated workers' First Amendment rights. See again, freedom of speech. So it's okay to say that, but I can't go to school and talk about God or the Bible. As a matter of fact, a teacher can't talk about God, the Bible, or creationism because that's considered what? So censorship again continues on one side, again continuing to prove that the United States is no longer just, or at least the government at the moment is no longer just. We need to vote these people out, and I know that the Republicans are saying we're not going to impeach Biden, but they really need to impeach Biden, and they need to impeach Garland, and they need to impeach Kamala Harris, and they need to impeach Nancy Pelosi. The extent to which the Department of Homeland Security initiative affects Americans' daily social feeds is unclear. During the 2020 election, the government flagged numerous posts as suspicious, many of which had been taken down, documents cited in the Missouri Attorney General lawsuit disclosed. And in 2021, reports of the Election Integrity Partnership Stanford University found that nearly 4,800 flagged items, technology platforms took action on 35%, either removing labeling or soft blocking speech, meaning that the users were only able to view content after bypassing a warning screen. The research was done in consultation with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Prior to the 2020 elections, Prior to the 2020 election, tech companies including Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, Wikipedia, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Verizon Media met on a monthly basis with the FBI, the CISA, and other government representatives. According to the NBC News, the meetings were part of an initiative still ongoing between private sectors and government, fascism, to discuss how firms would handle misinformation during the election. This is back in 2020. They were meeting on a weekly basis. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't on Trump's behalf, because remember, the Post got banned from Twitter. See, funny how YouTube isn't mentioned in this either. The stepped-up counter-disinformation effect began in 2018 following the high-profile hacking incident of U.S. firms when Congress passed and President Donald Trump signed the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency Act, forming a new wing of the DHS devoted to protecting critical national infrastructures. An August 2022 report by the DHS Office of the Inspector General sketches the rapidly accelerating move toward policing disinformation as well. Jen Easterly, Biden's appointed director of the CISA, swiftly made it clear that she would continue to shift resources in the agency to combat the spread of dangerous forms of information on social media. One could argue we're in the business of critical infrastructure, and the most critical infrastructure is our cognitive infrastructure. So building the resilience to misinformation and disinformation, I think it's incredibly important, said Easterly, speaking at a conference in November of 2021. Despite the First Amendment, the government is continuing to monitor your speech and deciding what is, and a person who wasn't even elected into office is now deciding what is misinformation and disinformation and harmful speech. I thought that because we had Section 230, it protected these private companies from having to worry about, the strong arm of the government. But now we have the strong arm of the government using these and 230 to manipulate speech. Could this have been why you have some of those CEOs saying we want the government to come out to get rid of 230 and come out with a more standard set of what is and is not misinformation? The CISA's domain has gradually expanded to encompass more subjects it believes amounting to critical infrastructure. Last year, The Intercept reported on the existence of a series of Department of Homeland Security field intelligence reports warning of attacks on cell towers, which it has tied to conspiracy theories who believe that 5G towers spread COVID. One intelligence report pointed out that these conspiracy theories are inciting attacks against these communication infrastructures. Who believes COVID-19 is spread by communication towers? Oh my gosh. See, and these are the people who are deciding for us what is misinformation and what is not, including being able to set up how they handle you. Look at Alex Jones. He's completely shut off. Even the banks are no longer dealing with him. And that's supposed to be okay? This is something, sanctioning the American people. This was something that was reserved for foreign governments only. And thanks to Obama now and Biden, now we're seeing these sanctions, very same sanctions applied to the American people. In June, the same Department of Homeland Security Advising Committee of CISA, which included Twitter head of legal policies, trust, and safety, Vijaya Gaddy, and the University of Washington professor Kate Starbird, by the way, there's no wonder why Elon fired her, drafted a report to the CISA director calling for an extensive rollout for the agency in shaping the information ecosystem. And the report called on the agency to closely monitor social media platforms of all sizes, mainstream media, cable news, hyper-partisan media, talk radio, and other online sources. They agreed that the agency needed to take steps to halt the spread of false or misinformation, with the focus on information that undermines key democratic institutes such as the courts or by other sectors such as the financial system or public health measures such as the lockdowns or COVID-19. And it's funny how The Atlantic comes out with an article saying how that we should give lockdown amnesties to all those officials who had us locked down and decided that we were non-essential people. At least in my state, that's how it happened. Yeah, right. Like I want to forgive them. Like I want to grant them amnesty. To accomplish these broader goals, the report said the CISA should invest in external research to evaluate the efficacy of intervention, specifically with research looking at how allegedly disinformation can be countered and how quickly the message could spread. Mr. Hale, the director of election security initiatives at the CISA, recommended the use of third-party information sharing nonprofit as a clearinghouse for information to avoid the appearance of government propaganda. The Biden administration, however, did take a stab at making part of the infrastructure public in April of 2022 with the announcement of the Disinformation Governance Board. The exact function of the board and how it would accomplish its goals of defining and combating misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation were never made clear. The board faced immediate backlash around the political spectrum. Who among us thinks the government should add to its work list the jobs of determining what is true and what is disinformation? And who thinks the government is capable of telling the truth? Wrote political media critic Jack Schaefer. Our government produces lies and misinformation at an industrial scale and always has. It overclassifies vital information to block its citizens from becoming all the wiser, and it pays thousands of press aides to play hide the salami with facts. This is also interesting. The broad definition of threat actors posing risk to vague defined critical infrastructures, an area as broad as trust in government, public health, elections, and financial markets, has concerned civil libertarians. No matter your political alliances, all of us have good reason to be concerned about the government's efforts to pressure private social media platforms into reaching the government's preferred decisions about what content we can see online. Any governmental request to social media platforms to review or remove certain content, he added, should be made with extreme transparency. Again, I agree. The DHS began to broaden its watch to include a wide array of domestic actors viewed as potential sources of radicalization and upheaval. An FBI official interviewed by The Intercept described how, in the summer of 2020, amid the George Floyd protests, he was reassigned from his normal job of countering foreign intelligence services to monitoring American social media accounts. The official, not authorized to speak publicly, described the reassignment on condition of anonymity. Biden also prioritized such efforts last year. The Biden administration released the first national strategy for counter domestic terrorism. The strategy identified as a broader priority enhancing faith in government and addressing the extreme polarization fueled by a crisis of disinformation and misinformation, often channeled through social media platforms, which would tear America apart and lead some to violence. Again, I call back to the red sermon when he's standing up there declaring that basically anybody who voted for Trump is an enemy of the state or a domestic terrorist, a person of interest. So this is why I've said before, it's only a matter of time, I'm sure, but at least I'll go down talking about my values and my morals. We are working with like-minded governments, civil society, and the technology sector to address terrorism and violent extreme content online, including through innovative research collaborations. The strategic document continued, adding that the administration was addressing the crisis of disinformation and misinformation, often channeled through social and other media platforms that can fuel extreme polarization and lead some individuals to violence. This concerns me as, again, this is a direct violation of the First Amendment. The Privacy Act of 1970, enacted following the Watergate scandal, restricted government data collection of Americans exercising the First Amendment right, a safeguard that civil liberties groups have argued limits the ability of DHS and the FBI to engage in surveillance of American political speech expressed on social media. The statute, however, maintains exemptions for information collected for the purposes of criminal and law enforcement investigation. So, by calling people domestic extremists or domestic terrorists, they're allowed to use the Patriot Act and just ignore everything from the Privacy Act of 1970. This is why Biden was standing up there going, these are the domestic extremists. These are the people who need to be watched. People like me, people who are Boy Scout, ex-Navy, father of 7, is a violent domestic extremist of the government that wants to control me, control what I eat, control what I think. I do not live in communist China, nor does any American, and I don't like that our government has decided that that's where we are. And as we move to digital currency, things are going to continue to get worse. In retrospect, the New York Post reporting on the content of Hunter Biden's laptop ahead of the 2020 election proved an elucidating case study of how this works in an increasingly partisan environment. Much of the public ignored the reports or assumed it was false, as over 50 former intelligence officials charged that the laptop story was created by Russian disinformation campaign. The mainstream media was primed by allegations of election interference in 2016. Trump did attempt to use the laptop to disrupt the Biden campaign. Twitter ended up banning links to the New York Post's report on the content of the laptop during the crucial weeks leading up to the election. Facebook also throttled users' abilities to view the story. In recent months, a clearer picture of the government's interference has emerged. He goes on to talk about how Zuckerberg said, oh, well, he let it slip, they kind of work. And no, it turns out they were meeting on a weekly basis to silence people against the First Amendment. This is huge. This means that the government has been monitoring us for a long time. And this is proof of it. Because as we know now, everybody's saying the Hunter Biden laptop is true. The Hunter Biden laptop story was only the most high-profile example of law enforcement agencies pressuring tech firms. In many cases, the Facebook and Twitter accounts flagged by DHS or its partners as dangerous forms of disinformation or potentially foreign influences were clearly parody accounts or accounts that virtually no followers or influencers. There is growing evidence that the legislative and executive branch officials are using social media companies to engage in censorship by surrogate, said Jonathan Turley, a professor of law at George Washington University, who has written about the lawsuit. It is axiomatic that the government cannot do indirectly what it is prohibited from doing directly. Or if government officials are directing or facilitating such censorship, it raises serious First Amendment questions. As I said, this is incredible. This is the federal government. This is proof that we live in a fascist state. So with that, I've moved to Odyssey, Grumble, and Locals, which are more free speech, less monitored by the federal government. I noticed mysteriously how YouTube isn't mentioned in any of this article, but it would explain for a lot of content creators why, if you're on the right wing and you just disappear one day, why it could have happened. Because someone in the government saw your video and decided that you were a threat to their power. Please vote Republican coming up on the 8th. Vote no if you're in New Mexico to the 2 constitutional amendments. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to join me today. I hope that there's something within this video that is a benefit to you or to somebody that you know. Please like, subscribe, and share this video as it does help. You can support us if you wish to become a member on Odyssey or Locals. And with that, I want to say thank you very much. United we stand, divided we fall. God bless you. God bless America.